And for the scoring itself, so let's talk about how you actually, and is it the same for the NPC, which is the amateur division? Is the scoring and how you score the same as how it works on a pro level stage?
Yes. And I'm very glad that you asked this because I get this question all the time. And it's not like a point system. It's not like you get like 1 to 10 points for your hair, 1 to 10 points for your conditioning. It's a ranking system. So for us, it's like who is the closest to the standard out of everyone on stage? And that person gets first place. And then who is the second closest, second place, and on down. So we're looking at everything in its totality. So we're looking at your shape, your muscularity, your conditioning, but then also your presentation comes into it. And say two people are close, like they're first and second, and we have to decide who is which. Sometimes that's where posing comes into it because it's not the physique you possess, it's the one you present. What do you show to us in the comparisons? And that can tip the scale.
Ever wonder if you are posing correctly for your division? Learn to Pose is dedicated to taking out the guesswork on how to pose for all categories in bodybuilding. Learn 5 ways you can improve your posing skills in 5 minutes guaranteed at www.learntopose.com.
Welcome back to the Everything Else in Bodybuilding podcast. I am your host, Michelle. Welcome. I have a very special episode for you guys today, all about the NPC and the IfBB Federation. I have an amazing guest with me today. She is an IfBB Pro League head judge. She's a Mr. Olympia and an Arnold Classic judge, an IfBB Bikini Pro, and an IfBB Figure Pro. So you have double pro cards, and also an NPC national champion as well. So I couldn't think of anybody better to have an amazing conversation, a well-rounded conversation. If you're brand new to the sport, you got no idea what you're doing, great episode. Even if you're a veteran, we're going to fill in a lot of the gaps to give you a nice, well-rounded episode. So again, I have an amazing guest for me today. Her name is Becky Clawson. Becky, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to have you. So please give the audience a little bit more of a background, how you got into bodybuilding, why are you judging?
Sure.
What got you into judging? And how did it grow to the point that you're now an Olympia level judge? So please share a little bit.
Sure. So I got into competing in my 20s. I just was looking for some kind of outlet, for athleticism. And I feel like for many of us, especially women, once we're out of college, there's not really a lot of options. There's not many intramural sports or any opportunity to compete as well as feel like a team, like camaraderie. So that really filled a gap for me to get into bodybuilding in that way. And then over time, as I competed, it began to dawn on me that, I'm not going to be able to do this forever. Even though I had a 10-year career, it's like you start to think, well, what am I going to do when I'm done competing? And there came a point where I took a year off just to get healthy and, deal with work and all that kind of stuff. And I had an opportunity to test judge. Someone was like, well, why don't you try that? See if you like it. And I loved it. I have a mind that's very analytical and very structured as it is. So it really appealed to me. And I felt like this was an opportunity to stay involved in the industry, even after I was done as a competitor. And also I wanted to give back. Sandy Williamson is the one that always comes to my mind as far as judges, and just her warm presence on the panel, just the simple fact that she smiles at the athletes. I'll remember those times. And I remember they calmed me down on stage and made me feel more confident, and her heartfelt advice and feedback over the years just really meant a lot to me. And I was like, I think this is the way I could give back. Like, I wouldn't be a good coach, wasn't interested in being a trainer. I'm not going to make suits or promote a show. I was like, I feel like this suits me. And I was very interested in learning more about it and doing as much as I could for judging. And luckily I had some amazing mentors, Gary Udit being one, really taught me how to judge and also how to head judge, because there's so much more involved than just judging the show, which I think you're a head judge as well, right?
Yes.
So,
yes,
it's like controlling the stage. It's about making sure the show flows with no breaks. You have to work with the expediters, the MC. make sure the athletes are happy, they're safe, like you kind of run the show. And so I had people teaching me that, not just kind of throwing me to the wolves and showing me this is the best way to do it. And this is our ultimate goal. And I've just soaked it all up, and just, the opportunities have presented themselves. Luckily, I've been very fortunate.
And at what point did it become something? I mean, you travel for judging, don't you? Is this like your full-time job, or is this
It
still
is not.
something interesting? So what do you do? How are you able to manage judging and traveling and another job?
I work quite a bit. So I work in technology. So yes, I work when I'm traveling. It feels like I work 7 days a week because, it's travel, it's judging the show. Sometimes I'll work in the hotel room, like before check-ins or before the athletes meeting, check emails, in between prejudging and finals. So I keep both balls in the air. I feel lucky that I have ample vacation time, that I'm able to travel. And really, I love to travel so much. So I don't want to turn any opportunity down if I don't have to, just because to be able to see the world, and especially see our athletes in other countries and see how bodybuilding is coming up around the world, is really a privilege. And I want to take advantage of that.
Where do you think it's coming up the most around the world, since you are traveling for shows?
I have to say definitely in Europe. And I've mentioned this to a lot of different people I've talked to. I was super impressed this year going to Spain and seeing some of the younger pros we have in bodybuilding there. They have a huge following on YouTube or on social media, which I think is a wonderful thing for us. It's not just like bodybuilders or a fitness niche that they have, but they're personalities, and they actually have fans who like them, for who they are and what they do even outside of bodybuilding. And those fans are coming to our shows, which is exciting because now we're getting audiences that maybe don't even know anything about bodybuilding, but they're like, I know this guy and I really like him, so I want to go see him if he's in town. And I'm seeing that in Asia as well. It's just really neat to see that our reach is increasing. And I think Chris Bumstead has a lot to do with that too. People are turned on to the idea of bodybuilding, and especially like classic physique and, everything he's done for the industry. I feel like a lot of people are using that as a platform and a jumping off point, which is exciting to see.
I see a lot of young guys doing the classic physique. There's a lot of young men coming into bodybuilding, and you'd think that they would go for the men's physique category. And we'll talk about the categories in a minute, but they love the artistic form of the classic physique, even though it's interesting because classic physique was just bodybuilding.
Right?
It was just bodybuilding, but now it's become its own thing, and it's certainly a global phenomenon. But that also leads me to, so if you're traveling globally and you're traveling around the country, is the judging consistent? So is the actual judging criteria for the NPC and the IfBB something that is uniform in the expectations, no matter if you're in Spain, you're, in Romania, or you're in, Texas, that'll be the exact same judging criteria and the exact same process? Is that the case?
Yes, and that's definitely a goal. When we started doing the NPC worldwide, that's why so many of us traveled, including Tyler and Sandy and everyone, because the goal was to ensure that the judging is going according to the criteria, and also that we're teaching judges and making sure, we coach them and all work together to make sure we're on the same page. I mean, I get that myself. Like at the Arnold or the Olympia, we talk about, this is what we want, this is what we don't. And we all kind of come together and agree, yes, this is what we're going to hold the line on. And then travel, for me, I feel like I'm going out and visiting all the different judges that we have and reiterating the same thing, because it's so important to be consistent, that people can show up to any show anywhere in the country and be judged in a way that they expect, right?
Absolutely.
So that's definitely our goal. I think the one thing that people get confused about, and I used to do it myself as an athlete, and I get this question all the time. It seems like every show, like I'll use Bikini for an example. Someone wins a Bikini show and they're like, oh, now they're going for muscle. Or the criteria has changed again. They're going for muscle. Or now they're going for really lean girls. Or now they want it really soft. And it's like, the criteria is always the same. It just depends who shows up. The Olympia is going to be more consistent because those girls are so close to the criteria. They are the ideal. So you should see a lot more standardization there. But, if it's a smaller pro show or certainly a national show on down to a local show, we can only judge who shows up. I'm sure you've had that experience as a judge. It's like if everybody shows up hard as nails, someone has to win. And it doesn't mean we think that's the criteria, right? Like our feedback would be, you should not be that hard. Like you have got to soften up or you've got to make these changes. But I feel like sometimes people see the winner's photo and they're like, oh, the criteria has changed. And it's like, no, maybe look at the totality of the class. And then you'll see that that was all we had to pick from.
Absolutely. It definitely changes based on who shows up. And as you go higher in the rankings, you're now talking people that have won championships. And then now you're talking on the pro stage, people that are champions. Not only that, but they're pros. So being able to distinguish that is something that I think for a brand new person, it's important. So what I say to my students, because I teach a lot of virtual posing classes, that's something that's my jam. So I'm talking to a lot of the students, and it's like, you can't put all your eggs into one basket. You can't just rely on that one show. And then the feedback that you're getting, you need to do additional shows and see what kind of feedback is consistent. But here's the thing, talking about the IFBB and NPC, I do have to say that the consistency of the judging, because I'm in bodybuilding for over 20 years. I see the whole industry as a whole, traveled the country, all different organizations, because I love the sport.
Yeah,
but what I can absolutely say myself, what I can say about NPC and IFBB is the consistency. So in talking with you, besides the consistency of the judging, I know that people are trying to figure out in this world of bodybuilding, where do I even go? What organization? What division? What would you say is the reason somebody should choose NPC and IFBB besides the consistency of judging?
Sure. So I would never say speak ill of another organization. I feel like I don't have enough information to do that. And, there's enough athletes out there for all of us. So I think it's definitely up to each individual, and I would never disparage somebody for whatever organization they pick. I know personally I picked the NPC when I started competing, just because back when I started competing, the level and quality of the show was better in the NPC. It was a little bit more consistent, stage production, expediting, timing of the show. It was a little more just consistent and something you could count on, that it was going to run smoothly and you were going to be on time and everything. And my coach was like, even though I was a natural athlete, he's like, I want you to have solid competition, and we're just going to go to shows where we feel like you have a good experience. And had there been any other ones in my area in another federation, maybe he would have considered that. But that's something I think that is really important for a first-time competitor too, is pick a show that is maybe has some history. It's been running for a few years. I know COVID messed up a lot of people, so maybe that's not so applicable right now. But one that, has a decent promotion. You've seen some photos. You've gotten some feedback that people enjoy the show. They enjoy their time on stage. I think that's something that we can really deliver as our shows level up and our production quality levels up. I also do like the fact that now we're really pushing for more natural shows. So I think it can, serve both audiences. Myself, I didn't care if I was competing against whomever, but I totally understand that people want to do natural shows. And we do have an opportunity to turn pro as a natural in a drug-tested show, and then also go to the Olympia as a natural athlete. So I think that's really cool. It's like we try to, serve everyone, give everyone the opportunity that they want to compete in and to give them the experience they want.
And that's also interesting you bring that up, because the natural shows versus not natural, so to speak, for the person who's brand new to the sport, what does that even mean? Natural versus unnatural?
So I would have to say in our federation, they test for things. And I think this is probably true for other ones too, but like diuretics, anabolic steroids. I think things like clenbuterol or whatever it is that stimulates fat loss, essentially things that are illegal anyway. Like you really shouldn't be taking them unless, some diuretics are by prescription. That's what our tests pick up. But I think there are some federations that test even more stringently for different things.
Some tests.
There's polygraph tests for some organizations. And
yeah, I mean, some of them go as far as adhering to the WADA guidelines. Some of them take the WADA guidelines and a polygraph test. It really does depend. But the shows that don't drug test is just basically that. There's no polygraph. There's no urine testing. There's no nothing. It's basically you come into the show and you get on stage and you compete against people from all different levels and all different backgrounds and whatever their journey is. And I'm with you, Becky. It really, to me, at the end of the day, I competed as a natural athlete myself, and I didn't care who I was standing up against because it was really my journey. It was me against me, and I wanted to see how I could do at my highest level. So it's really not about a moral issue for this conversation. It's more about what's the journey of a person coming into the sport? What does it look like for them? So you mentioned that there's natural shows that they're adding additional ones. I know there's the Ben Weider Naturals and I believe Virginia. And I think Gary puts that one on. Yeah. Gary organizes all that down in that region. And that one is interesting because let's go on to talk about, for somebody who's new, getting their pro card. Like that's like, oh my God. Now you're seeing, right, on the social media, you're seeing in the headline, I'm now a national qualified NPC competitor. Now that's a status too. Do you know what I mean?
Which it never was
so now
when I was competing.
Oh my God. So now you're a national level competitor, but that's like, because why? Because the journey to getting a pro card is quite tiered. And I'd love to just ask you about that and also compare it to what happens when you go to like the Ben Weider Naturals. It's a little bit different of a journey to get your pro card versus other avenues. So can we just talk about that to summarize and clarify that a little bit?
Yeah. So, getting your pro card, the main thing I tell people about that journey is to have patience. And I love what you just said. It's about your own journey. I think the best coaches focus their athletes on that because you have to focus on what you can control. And that's bringing your best self, working within your genetics to bring your best physique. But the things you can't control are who shows up. So sometimes that can be why a really talented athlete maybe, takes a little longer to turn pro because it depends who shows up on that day. Start out on a local level. Everyone starts out on a local level. You do a national qualifier show to get qualified to go to the national show. I think that wise coaches coach their athletes regarding are they ready or not before they send them to a national show, because the level of competition can be very steep. And I think if someone's not maybe ready for that, say you show up at a show and you happen to take second in your class and, you're qualified, but that was your first show. You may not be ready like mentally to step on stage with all of these top level athletes. And I think that can be decimating for an athlete if a coach doesn't take that into consideration. Like their body needs to be ready, but so does their mindset. And then when they are ready to get to the national level, obviously the physique has to be on point, posing, presentation, the overall look has to be right on point. That can be the difference between, fifth and first. And then, hopefully you bring it all together and win your pro card by placing, whatever is required at a certain show. And I will say that we've had a lot of talent come through the Ben Weider show. And we have pros that win that show that go to the Olympia that have also won other pro shows. So there's a lot of talented athletes that go through that show. And I just love to see that. I think it's a great example for other athletes. Like you can do it however you choose to. Whether you want to follow this path or that path, there are people out there who can serve as an example for you.
Well, let's unpack that just a little bit. So let's just say this brand new competitor finds a local show, because there's a lot of shows. How many amateur shows are around the country? Do you even know?
I don't even know, but I know our season starts so early now. Like I think we start having shows in January and we go all the way through December now. So
there's got to be thousands.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's thousands of shows. So there's availability everywhere to be able to do a local show. So doing this local show, it has to be a national qualifier. But don't you have to place a certain placement?
Yes. Yep.
In order to qualify?
Place top 2 in an open class. So if you place in masters, that doesn't necessarily qualify you like to our nationals. You have to place top 2 in an open class. Now we do have masters nationals, which you can compete in if you're, over 35. And that only requires you to compete in an NPC show in that season. So there's no qualification requirements for that. And that's a good opportunity for our masters pros. But otherwise it has to be top 2 in their class.
That's a big distinguishing factor. Although it's always been that way, that it's always been the open, but because there's so many, I don't know about you, but maybe the last 5 years, the amount of people reaching out to me for posing guidance, men and women, over 50 is bonkers. So I get that and they just did the Masters Olympia, brought that back after I don't know how many years. And it was because I remember Tyler saying that if the quality's there, we'll bring it back. And this was like in discussions a couple of years ago, and then all of a sudden it came back. So there's obviously a lot of talent, but I think there is that confusion. So what we're saying here on a local amateur stage, top 2 in the open will bring you to a national level. So now we're at a national level competition. How do you earn your pro card?
If you're at the national level, it depends what show you're at. So nationals, top 2 in your class, you get your pro card. I think at like junior USA's, it's like half of the overall, like, so if there's 6 classes, it would be 3 in the overall. I think the same thing, there's no pro card for open bodybuilding at the junior shows. So junior USA's and junior nationals. But the best shot for a pro card and also the most competitive shows are the USA's and the nationals. And that's where top 2 in the class turn pro, but it is also a very competitive show.
Very competitive shows. So that's okay. So that's how you get your pro card. But now let's talk about the Ben Weider Naturals. So can you not have competed on a local stage and just go to the Ben Weider show? Can you just be your first show ever in life?
I think you have, gosh, that is a great question. I think you have to have competed, but don't quote me on that. You might not have to because I know we don't require you to compete in like a drug tested show or anything. I don't know of any requirements like that. So I think technically you could just go to Ben Weider and compete.
And this is the thing I want. Yeah. I want to make sure everybody
really, right?
I know. So people that are just getting into the sport, it really kind of depends. And you have to understand the promoter, you understand what the show is. So this is like a special show that, you can just potentially just walk on stage for the very first time. Now you can compete as the amateur on one day, and I think the pro show is the next day, right?
Yes.
So
yes, which is very exciting.
As an amateur, get your pro card, and then what happens on Sunday?
Yeah.
You can compete as a pro, right?
Yeah. And we have had people, because we have pro qualifiers around the world, and that's usually how they stage it, is they do the pro qualifier first, and we ask everyone, do you want to do the pro show? And we've had people do really well, including qualifying to the Olympia. Like they go from amateur to Olympian in like 48 hours, and it's the craziest thing to watch.
So freaking fun. How amazing that would be to have that opportunity. So there's that. So, why don't they drug test then? Because there's a lot of interest for people that want to do the shows, the Ben Weiders and stuff. Why wouldn't they just make it uniform? Why make it something special? Is there a reason for that? Or
I think it's just opening it up to, all customer types, because really the athletes are customers. So, whatever type of athlete wants to compete, they have that avenue. But bodybuilding traditionally has never been drug tested. And drug testing on the way, and I know you're going to ask me about this, but I'm going to preempt it, like the way the Olympics does, right? Which, we were talking about. That's more performative and like athletic performance and what they test for. We're an aesthetic organization. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily the same thing. And I don't know, kind of like you and I were talking earlier, the requirements for testing vary between organizations, and I think it's sometimes hard to come to an agreement on that. And I think that's why we've just kind of left things the way that the organization was started from the beginning and tried to open up more avenues. Like, I know for sure that they're trying to have more natural shows in our federation over the next couple of years, just to give even more opportunity to the natural athletes, and to, leave opportunities that exist for anyone who just wants to compete, in any open show, but add the opportunities for our natural athletes too, and give them the same, possibility that they can turn pro, they can go to the Olympia, which I think that's so special. And that's so unique.
That's so special. It really is. And I think that's important for new people because I mean, there's so many of these gurus that are online, and they got these groups out there that everyone's an expert in, by the way. And oh my God. And the people that are saying it's kind of like a hard line in the sand. You're either drug testing and going over here, or you're not drug testing and going to this organization. And what you're saying here, and just clearing up the air, is that there are drug tested opportunities. There are shows that are drug tested. And not only that, they're adding additional drug tested shows. So you can't officially say that the NPC and the IFBB are only all about people that are enhanced, so to speak. So I think that's important. But let's go on to talk about what also has changed through the years. So you started in how long ago? Many years ago.
Oh gosh.
Figure Pro and Bikini Pro?
Yeah, a long time ago. I'm dating myself, but yes, 2004.
So you started in 2004, pretty much when Figure came out.
Yes.
And you must have gotten your pro card pretty quick.
I did in 2007. So it took me a little while. I would say I followed a pretty textbook path, like did local shows for 2 years, hit the national circuit for 2 years. And on my second year, I turned pro. But Figure was the only option, unless you wanted to do fitness. That was it. So and even that was a struggle for me. And those girls, we were not as muscular or maybe as lean as some of the Figure girls are now, but that was a struggle for me. I wish Bikini had been around back then. I would have been more genetically suited to that, for sure.
So you started in Figure back when they're pretty much, Figure was started because I know that they made it for fitness competitors to have an opportunity to compete in a bodybuilding type competition without being required to do the demands of the routine.
Yes.
Which I love watching the routines. They're my favorite part of the Olympia, by the way.
I know, mine too. That's my favorite.
Those ladies,
so entertaining.
So amazing. So entertaining. Yes. I'm glad that there's still fitness is out there. But anyways, Figures was started to have that avenue, and then it evolved over the years. So what would you say? So let's talk about what the different options are for competitors in the NPC and the IFBB, and from men and women, because I don't like to talk about just one division. To me, I started in bodybuilding. That was my jam, bodybuilding.
Oh, that's cool. I'm jealous. I wish I could have done bodybuilding. I always loved so bodybuilders. Yeah, I love it. Awesome.
I love it. So to me, everyone's a bodybuilder is just a little articulated a little bit differently in the posing, of course, the criteria. So let's talk about that for a second. So what are the options for men? What are there for women? And how do the different options differ amongst each other?
So starting with women, that kind of our gateway division, I would call Bikini. So it is about balance. It's about muscle. It's about a feminine shape that is built on a foundation of muscle. But without extreme leanness, without, overpowering density or depth to the physique. It's just about building out shape and, so rounded shoulders, tight waist, rounded glutes, and shapely legs. It's a look that most women can shoot for and attain, with proper training and nutrition. And then from there, we move up to wellness. Wellness is very similar to Bikini, but the legs are so much more muscular and have that density and depth to them. And I'm really glad that we brought wellness into the fold, because so many women get into bodybuilding and competing because they come from other sports. Well, if you come from a sport like soccer or something like that, you're going to have more muscular legs. And to run those down and to get them balanced enough for Bikini it's torturous. And I hate to see people try to burn off muscle. So I think considering the fact that most women are lower body dominant, wellness is a great option for people so they can build that muscle versus having to cut it down. From there, we go to Figure, which is, again, balanced. It's symmetrical with the same muscularity on top as you have on the bottom. And that's where you have a little bit more density to the muscle. We're looking at back density. That comes into play into that division. Little leaner. We're still not looking for, vascularity, striations, things like that. Sid Gillian is a great example. She's just fantastic that she can get that separation without looking, grainy or too hard. Like that sometimes can be a real fine line. And she's such a good example of that. From there, we have women's physique, which is a little bit more muscle. The posing changes, that's a little closer to bodybuilding with the way that they pose. But again, we don't want to see the depth and the size that you would see on like a bodybuilder. And we want to see more flow to the physique, kind of in between Figure and bodybuilding, but they will be a little bit more conditioned. We don't really want to see striations in that division either, so they have to be careful not to be too conditioned. And then from there, there's women's bodybuilding. And, it's about size, of course. They can put on as much size as they want, but it's still about symmetry and shape, right? And I love, Andrea Shaw is probably
Gorgeous.
one of our best examples we've had in so long, because she's not even overly conditioned. Like, she's tight and she's hard and everything, but still has that feminine look and just that flow to her physique that is so beautiful. And I just love her, having her as an example for that division, because I feel like women would aspire to look like that, and maybe they're able to put on the muscle, God bless them. I wish it was me, but maybe they're able to put on the muscle. And that's a look I think is very appealing to women.
It's interesting you say that, because I told you that I teach virtual posing classes. I teach it for all the divisions. It's my jam. So what's really interesting to me is talking about like the muscularity poses. How many women love to learn them? Like,
yes.
Figure girls, they learn, like, I teach all these things. So they're learning muscularity poses. Like, I mean, with respect, you wouldn't, as a figure girl on an NPC stage, again, every organization has different standards. But on the NPC IfBB stage, I'm not encouraging you figure girls to go out there and hit a side tricep. What I'm saying is they like to learn the poses. And there's something fun about the muscularity about it. So when you said like women would aspire maybe to be, to look like Andrea Shaw, I think women really just like to see their hard work and the efforts that they've done in the gym. And when you hit a little side try or little something, it's super fun. And you can, great Instagram material.
Yeah, it's true.
But I also say the more you pose, the better you get at posing. So I do think there's a positive transfer. So it's not just like I'm being silly about Instagram, but there is something to that. So having said the different divisions, you've got bikini, wellness, figure, physique, and bodybuilding. That is all the different options you have for the women.
Oh, and fitness. Oh my goodness.
Of course.
How can we forget fitness? But yes, fitness has the routine as well as the physique round. The physique is close to figure. Sometimes the fitness girls are a little bit harder just because of the rigors of the routine. Like, you can't help but get in amazing shape when you're training a routine along with bodybuilding. But yeah, that's the other option for women too. I don't know either. They are tremendous athletes.
Amazing athletes. And I know one, what was her name? She competed with a broken leg. She won too. Oh, she's a fitness, the Olympia. Yeah. Whitney. Oh, I love her.
Yeah.
She is so awesome.
She is.
The guts that girl has. You might see a video of her, you guys, preparing for the Olympia, and she broke her leg and she's there with the leg brace on, still flipping around on the floor, getting ready for the Olympia. I'm like, that's a whole nother level of talent, that fitness division. So not to scare you that you have to, no matter what, but you have to compete with broken leg. But I'm saying these ladies are amazing. And the quality and the talent pool is super awesome. So the divisions, so the fitness is kind of its own thing, because what we talked about, bikini, wellness, figure, physique, and bodybuilding, basically the difference between each of the divisions was level of muscle, depth, and level of conditioning. So that's pretty much the difference. However, with wellness being a little bit of an outlier, being lower body dominant, you've got bikini, figure, physique, and bodybuilding that are not looking for lower body dominant, they're looking for proportion. So if I was to summarize it for you, am I missing anything, Becky, on that before we move on to the men?
That's perfectly said. And that's a great way to encapsulate it. You should see the changes in conditioning and muscularity as you move up and down the scale.
And people are complaining about the level of muscularity and conditioning is like absolutely bonkers now and it's unattainable, blah, 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 blah. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that's fair to say. I think sometimes people go off photos, which is constantly a battle that we have as judges when trying to explain the criteria and, help athletes prepare for shows. Everyone looks sharper in the photos. So everyone looks leaner. And I mean, it's hard for me to hear stuff like that because as a natural athlete who's not super gifted, I'm not genetically gifted in any which way. But I know, for bikini, I was able to achieve that level of conditioning, myself. So it is possible to achieve it. It's just hard work. And I don't think it's too extreme, especially, what we're looking for in our gateway division, and to see, even our figure athletes and how healthy they are, and knowing some of them personally. I think it's just a misconception and, sometimes a cop out that people want to say. But really, if you do things the right way with the right coaching and guidance, you can achieve that. And it's not out of reach for people. We make sure of that, especially for the gateway division.
And if you see these girls in person, they're really, the bikini division in particular, they're really tiny.
Yes. And that's
but they are
lean,
point. but they stay lean year round. Here's the thing. Like, you hear a lot of the sorority of suffering out there about, yes. Oh my God, I suddenly I went off and I gained 500 pounds after my show. And but these ladies, like if you look at Ashley Caltwater, she's the one champion in the IfBB who's won the most competitions. She's most champion of champions. That girl is never out of shape.
Right. And she's a great example because she's done this for a while now. She's been competing for over 10 years. Her body and her muscle maturity and everything, she's gotten to a point where it is a lifestyle, and the more muscle maturity you have, the easier it is to stay in shape. And you're right. These girls do try to stay healthy year round. And that means, doing reverse diets after shows to gain weight in a healthy way and balance their hormones. And, they do stay within range, so it's not so hard to come back in for a show. And I think that how small they are and the size they are really matters when people think about muscularity, right? And size. Like, they'll look at some of these girls and say, oh my gosh, she's so muscular. She has so much muscle. But by seeing them in person, they're quite tiny. It's just about proportion. And a lot of that is posing. So they may, look tiny standing in front of you, but when they get on stage and they hit their pose or they open up, everything changes. And all of a sudden it's a totally different athlete. So it's not that they're so huge and so muscular. It's that they're presenting themselves in that manner. And then you see them walking around and they just look like a fit, healthy person.
I mean, I do have to say, just, being personal for a second, even, when I was competing for shows, to me, the best I ever looked on stage were the times that I maintained a really good lean condition year round. So it was a dial for the show versus those who spend the time, they have an excess weight they need to lose in addition to getting stage lean. There's they see it as one thing versus what these athletes do is they consider it a lifestyle and they live it as a lifestyle and they live this way year round. But I mean, they're not stage lean necessarily, but they're within range that they can get there in a very slow, meticulous manner without being a torpedo to the stage. So that's basically, a little bit of some thoughts on the female divisions, but the men also have some really great options too. Can we talk about what the options are for the men?
Yeah. So our gateway division for the men is men's physique. And that is like a healthy athletic look, balanced again, front to back, but not too big. Like, there was discussion for a while there, it's just classic physique and board shorts. Well, that's definitely not the look we want. If the shoulders are super big, the arms are super big, that's too much. That is classic physique. And also too much density. If their conditioning is too much, like, they should be full and sharp and crisp. But again, same thing if they're grainy, if they're vascular, that's too much. That's more of a bodybuilding type conditioning level. This is something that they should be able to achieve maybe as they're working their way into the other divisions, as a starting point, but it certainly looks different than bodybuilding. It's more of a fitness model, I would say, in that realm. And then upwards from that, like we talked before, classic physique, Chris Bumstead is probably the best example of that. And he actually turned pro as a bodybuilder, a heavyweight bodybuilder. And he has said before, if I didn't have classic, I might not have competed ever as a pro, because he didn't want to have to move up from a heavyweight bodybuilding weight and physique to compete in open bodybuilding. So it's the next level where you get into bodybuilding, but there's height and weight requirements. So it kind of keeps everyone on the same level. Like, you can't weigh over a certain amount if you're 5'7". And so it kind of levels the playing field that no one's ever going to get too big for that division, because the weights kind of keep that under control. And next year we're enacting the same thing for men's physique, actually. a height and weight requirement on the pro level. So I think that'll help us keep the size and the muscularity under control there too. From there, there's the 212 division. Just another, notch up into bodybuilding. But again, there's that weight limit. So you're competing against people who say you're a little bit shorter. Sean Clarita is a great example, although he's so good, he can compete in open bodybuilding. But,
yeah,
and he did. Fantastic. Yeah.
And he did.
Outstanding.
And he did great.
Yes. Yep. He held his own. But for, some of our other bodybuilders who maybe don't have that mass or that density or just don't want to put that on, they can compete in the 212 division, which again, there's a limit. Nobody can go above that. So it evens out the playing field a little bit. And then of course there's open bodybuilding where as long as you're a pro, however you come in is however you come in. And the requirements for that are, of course, mass, density, fullness, conditioning. That's where we see some of the freakier physiques, but it is still about aesthetics and about symmetry. And I think we have some really great bodybuilders as examples through all of the divisions, but especially in open, Derek Lunsford, Samson is great. Hottie, really, they're
Hottie.
Yeah,
Hottie.
More aesthetic. I feel like those top bodybuilders really have such a nice look that incorporates flow as well. They're not only just the mass monsters; they have just really pretty flow to their physiques too.
I think a lot of that has to do with time. Like if you look at Sean Corita, for example, he didn't just lift a dumbbell once and then appear on a bodybuilding stage. That man worked decades. He's been training for decades. These guys are put a lot of time into it. This is not a short. I love it. But one thing about bodybuilding, maybe you realize the last show that was national show. There was I think it was actually the Masters Nationals. There was a 90 man who was in his 90s competing on stage. What show was that? Do you remember?
Probably Masters Nationals or North Americans. It could have been North Americans too.
Okay. So this guy is in his 90s, you guys. Like this sport could be lifeline. It could lifelong. It could be possibly that long. So, but these open bodybuilders are its own thing because these guys are really, really, really big. They're carrying a tremendous amount of muscle. That takes a lot of work. Takes a lot of food. But again, just kind of circling back to, unpacking just a little bit what you said, the difference between men's physique, working your way up to classic, debatably 212. Don't you have to be shorter to be 212 though?
There's no height requirement.
Is there a height limit? There is no height requirement?
Nope.
Okay. Weight. So and just weight requirement and then going up to open. And there's a lot of changes that are going on. They did talk about men's physique, the board shorts. They're like, has to be a certain distance above the knee, got to be a little bit more tapered. The weight cap, they did bump the weight cap on the classic physique guys.
Yes. This
is all happening after this year's Olympia though.
Yes. Yeah, they want to. I'm so glad they announced it early. So it gives people time to prepare. And they did a lot of research going into it too. Taking sample height and weight from different pro shows or, just to gather where are people sitting with their weights, so it wasn't some unreasonable or arbitrary, point to hit. They actually had data on it and said, okay, this is where our top athletes seem to be. This seems to be reasonable. This is where, we'll set our limits and our guidelines. So I'm proud of that.
I think that's great.
Yeah,
I think that's great. Keep the standard of the divisions or bring them to a standard that they're looking for. I think that's great. But what do you think has been the biggest change over the years? So you've been in this industry a long time, almost 20 years, right? 2004 is when you started. You've been judging forever and a half. You judge a lot of shows. You travel the country. You are just so cool. So, having said that, Becky, so what is the biggest change that you've seen over the years? Like the biggest standout, the biggest change that you've seen evolving in the sport of bodybuilding?
I think just
across all divisions.
Obviously social media, I'm sure you feel the same way. Social media just changed things with, fitness influencers and things like that. And I think it gave our competitors more visibility and more opportunities, maybe for, self-promotion and, maybe they're able to do something successful in that realm that maybe they're not so successful on stage, but they can go hand in hand. And I really think that increased our visibility quite a bit. Physique wise, one thing we will always see with elite athletes like this, athletes who are the top 1%, in the world, they are always going to push the envelope. And I think that is the reason more than anything why people say, oh, the division's getting more muscular or harder. I think the trend is always going to be that way. It's our job to hold the standard and hold the line and say, no, this is too much, and pull it back down, or give the feedback that, no, that's a little bit, over the line. But these are athletes who are trying to maximize their physiques, right? And they're always trying to win. They're trying to be the next best thing. And so they want more muscle, or they want more density. They want to be leaner. They're always going to try to bring in something that no one's done before, they haven't done before. So I think we see that just over time, and especially I think some of it is as training and nutritional information has become more readily available. I think the trainers today just have so much more knowledge, and they can do great things to keep our athletes healthy. I think that shows also in their conditioning and, the muscle they're able to carry. Like, reverse dieting was not a thing when I competed. Like, you were done and you just started eating again. And it led to exactly what you said. You put on this extra weight, you felt terrible. Like, nobody really had that concept. And now that we have things like that, I feel like it just opens the door for athletes really to have better physiques, because there's so much more knowledge out there. And I feel like there's more knowledge shared. I mean, not all of it's great, because like you said, everyone tries to be a coach. You definitely have to filter your information, but there's good information out there. And I think that just, raises the level of everyone up. That's the biggest change I've seen over time.
So level of competitiveness, but also level
Yes.
of information that has allowed and almost created the competitiveness, the opportunities for it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the adding of the divisions has really been a game changer too. It's changed, like we talked earlier about Chris Bumstead and the youth over in Spain, for example. You were saying there's a big appeal to bodybuilding. It's really brought Chris Bumstead and the idea of classic and even bikini. The beauty of the bikini division has brought a lot of interest to people that are coming out of the woodwork and just wanting to do this thing called bodybuilding. It's not this like weird thing anymore,
Right.
Like back in the day, to think of like a cheerleader in the weight room, it wouldn't happen. Now they're in the weight room, they're putting up some serious hip thrusts. Have you seen Erin Stern, for example, bikini competitor? That girl is strong. These girls are strong. There's no joke.
She's an athlete. Absolutely.
Yeah.
She could outlift probably most people in the gym. I agree.
She had like 5 plates on each side of the hip. I'm like, who are you? This girl is superhuman. And this bikini, right? Yep. So I definitely see this evolution as well. Why do you think people want this IFBB Pro card so much? Do you think it has to do with the social media? Do you think it really gives them an advantage? Or I guess, what is the biggest advantage of the IFBB Pro card?
I think that a lot of people do want it, maybe for the clout. I mean, it's always been a thing that has been like this illustrious pie in the sky goal. I know when I started, we did not award many pro cards. So it was really, a reach to try to get your pro card. And I know the way it was presented to me by my coach, if I had the opportunity to get a pro card, I may not have been the most competitive pro, but I was always a pro. Like, that's what they said. They're like, no one can ever take that away from you. You've achieved something special. It is. And it's a feeling of like success, like, holy smokes, I actually did this for myself. I think it is a real feeling of gratification and satisfaction that you've actually done this really hard thing and been rewarded for it. When people say like, does it help you as far as business or coaching or things like that? I would say no. I know I actually used to have a roommate who I turned pro before she did. And she was a personal trainer, and she worried about like, oh, I'm not a pro yet. This is going to affect my business. And I'm like, it doesn't affect your knowledge. It doesn't affect, how well you work with people. I think that's the most important thing. And I feel like the opposite can be true. There can be people who compete and get a pro card and think they can coach people, and that may not be the fact, and I think that there are plenty of good amateurs who are great coaches. I mean, you can't always control your genetics, right? That's what I always say. Like, there are a lot of coaches who have competed to the best of their level, but they just never had genetics that were ever going to allow them to turn pro. Doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. So I think, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's a great personal accomplishment, but it doesn't necessarily put a stamp on someone like, oh, this person knows how to train other people, I would say.
Isn't that interesting? Because you've got people like Dr. Mike T. Nelson, for example. He's like a PhD in everything. Or even Dr. Campbell. He, at the University of South Florida, he has a facility that actually studies physique athletes, because there's a lot of data on weight loss and obesity.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of data on weight loss and obesity. But to understand weight loss and how food and just the process of, just bodybuilding and being fit and in shape, how does that change the data? It's extremely interesting. But he's not an IFBB pro, but he's a PhD.
And that's the thing, like how much more educated and intelligent in it can you be, right? And I think people need to look at that and not hang so much on the title as far as if you're looking for information and guidance and things like that.
Somebody who's well-rounded.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes for posing people. Oh, that is the biggest pet peeve of mine. Somebody can hit a pose, or even is a natural at posing. I'm not impressed with the people who are coaches and they post these like posing pictures of athletes who are just probably were dancers or they're just natural at this. And all of a sudden it's like, this was my star student who got a pro card. It's like, how about the people that walk like a Clydesdale or clomp, around? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you could take that person.
Yeah.
Oh my God, where is space? Am I even in space? Where am I? Oh boy, those are always an interesting transformation for me. But I love those because I believe everybody deserves a chance to become amazing, and anybody can with the right strategy. So having said that, there is a difference, and there's no standard in posing, and that's a big thing right now. You see so many of these posing tutorials, which leads me into the next discussion about standards of what the expectations are in the NPC and the IfBB. How much weight does your individual posing routine actually have in your scoring? And is there a look? I'll get to this one. I got to put the fingers out here. Is there an actual look that, like the looky-loo over the shoulder, or this particular walk, or just a way that you're moving in and out of the poses? Is there an expectation that you guys have for the athletes, or is there not? And I'm gonna hear what you have to say first, and I'm gonna share the information that I'm getting from the people, because I teach hundreds of athletes a year in my classes. So I get people from all levels, and the perception is very interesting. So I want to hear and have the audience hear from Becky Clawson. On this subject. It was a pro, like a multi-pro. She's a Olympia judge, head judge. You are okay. Hear it from Becky first. If you don't want to hear it from me, hear it from Becky. Go ahead.
Yes. I would say the main thing about posing, and this is something you touched on before, is confidence. And I think that's the big benefit of having a posing coach, right? Is to kind of work you through your poses, put you in poses that show your best physique, but also make you confident up there. We're judges, we're human, and that it factor has an impact on us. And from the minute you step on stage, you don't even have to do a ton of poses, which actually I don't recommend. Less is more. But if you walk out there confidently, holding your head high, your posture is upright, you're presenting yourself gracefully and fluidly, that's hard to look away from. That I would say catches our attention more than anything. And that's really the point, is to make us look at you. And all of it comes into play, whether it's your hair, your suit, your makeup, your tan, your posing. You want to look as pulled together as possible, so that we say, that girl has the entire package. Like, I want to see more of that. So it does matter, for sure.
And for the scoring itself, so let's talk about how you actually, and is it the same for the NPC, which is the amateur division? Is the scoring and how you score the same as how it works on a pro level stage?
Yes. And I'm very glad that you asked this, because I get this question all the time. And it's not like a point system. It's not like you get like 1 to 10 points for your hair, 1 to 10 points for your conditioning. It's a ranking system. So for us, it's like, who is the closest to the standard out of everyone on stage? And that person gets first place. And then who is the second closest? Second place, and on down. So we're looking at everything in its totality. So we're looking at your shape, your muscularity, your conditioning, but then also your presentation comes into it. And say two people are close, like they're first and second, and we have to decide who is which. sometimes that's where posing comes into it, because it's not the physique you possess, it's the one you present. What do you show to us in the comparisons? And that can tip the scale. I will say, if you come on stage with no tan, an unflattering suit, your hair's a mess, like you do all the little things wrong, you would have to have a tremendous physique, like a physique that is undeniable to beat someone who has a decent physique, but probably has everything pulled together. It looks so much better and so much different on stage. It just matters that much. And it can be the decision between first and second. So that's how we score. So we score 1 through 16. After 16, we stop scoring. We'll have anywhere from 5 to 7 judges, usually on a panel. We drop the high and the low. So if somebody decides, the entire panel thinks this person's in fourth, but someone likes them for first, that would get dropped. And likewise, if we all think they're first and someone thinks they're fourth, that would get dropped. And then everything gets added, and then the placings go accordingly. So it is really a group consensus. It's not just one person's decision. It's the entire panel. And we'll have discussions about it, which I think is important, because I always ask my fellow judges, what is your opinion? Where do you have this person? Because maybe they've seen something I missed. Maybe I was writing something down and I missed, oh, well, when she turns, this looks a little funny, or this is a little imbalanced, or something like that. So we all do talk and say, this is what I like about this athlete. This is what I like about this athlete. And then we score our individual sheets.
When do you have these discussions? Is this during the judging component? Like when the athletes are up on stage and they're up there, you're actually talking amongst each other?
Mm-hmm.
How do you talk to the person all the way on the end? Is it like a text or something?
If only. Like, usually they're close enough that it's true, the people next to me I talk to the most. But we'll ask for their feedback, and especially like on call outs. That's one thing that I want athletes to know, is that all the judges submit their top 5s for call outs. So we take everybody into consideration. And like you're saying, like, I can't holler down to the end of the table, but they'll, pass slips down as to who they want to see. And sometimes they'll just turn to them and say, hey, do you want anyone moved? Is there you want to see anyone or anything like that? And that's easy enough to do. And that way they have their input as well.
So when the athletes first come out on stage, and it's the same process for both the amateurs and the pros, right?
Typically.
Does it matter what the show is? They come out by themselves first. Everybody has a moment to come out. Even if you're amateur, it's like 10 seconds. Get out of there.
Yeah.
It's quick, right?
Yes.
So you have a couple seconds for the judges to see you and then get in line, right?
Yes,
That's not and then how does all that work?
I will say it depends on the size of the class or the size of the show. So if we have a really big class, like say there's 20 athletes in a class, I will ask them to come out first in groups, and we'll just do comparisons. Like bikini, I would just turn them front and back. And for me, that's just an opportunity for me to see the depth of the class. So we can see like, oh, wow, this is a really competitive class. Like everyone looks really good. We've got to be keep that in mind when taking a look at them individually. So we'll do that on the bigger classes. Otherwise, like smaller classes, they just come out and do their individuals first. In the bigger classes after the comparisons, they'll do their individual posing routines. And that's where we actually slot them into their call outs. Because we've seen the quality of the class. We're deciding, who looks good in comparison to everybody else that's up there. So both matter equally. I know that, some people will say, oh, the posing doesn't matter at all. It definitely matters to me. I take a look at every individual routine, because there's sometimes where you might miss someone. Like that's my biggest fear, is to miss someone. So I look at every person that comes out and watch them individually. I write notes for feedback at that time too. And that way I ensure that I have everyone slotted where I feel they belong. And I've given them the attention and fully, assessed their physique. So nothing is missed. No one is missed.
So I think it's important to note just how the judging is done is different in the IfBB and the NPC from other organizations, where the individual routine really happens later. A lot of times it's not even scored. It doesn't even factor into scoring at all. So basically they come out and they do the spin around, depending on what division it is and what federation. It'll be either be 4 poses or 2. And that's kind of where all the scoring happens. The judges don't talk amongst each other. Ranking system depends on the organization. I judge for about 4 of them. So it does depend on the organization, whether it's just a one slaughter or if it's multi-columns. So what makes NPC and IFBB different is that you stop at 16. You also, it depends on the size of the show. You basically either will bring them out individually to get a good look and then do the group comparisons. Or if it's enormous, like the Olympia, for example, you bring them out in groups to get an idea of how everybody, total picture. The judges each write down their favorites, so the 5 that they want to see in first call-outs. And that's kind of how the journey starts. So at what point do the judges know they're done? Does it like everybody say we're good? And
yeah. So for me as a head judge, I make sure that everyone's where we think they should be, or everyone's been compared. Because one thing I will say too, I know everyone always says, I want the center spot because they think that's first place. That's a big thing in the NPC and the IFBB. And for us as judges, at least, from my experience, my job is not to place you in the center and say you're first, is to compare you with like physique so we can make a decision. So it could be these 2 people over here I need to compare because they're really close. They could be second and third. And so if that's where, the toss-up is, I'll ask the judges, are you good with this? You've seen everything you need to see, and make sure they've got their scores written down, and then we'll dismiss.
And then later on, the individual routines, those are after all the scores, like they happen again, right? In the local shows, do they just happen when they first... Yeah.
Well, we do our scores. It would be, say, they come out in a big group, they do their comparisons front to back, they come out individually, then we do the call out, and that's when we score. And that's prejudging for us. Yeah.
And then if it was a small show, it would be one at a time, then the group comparison, have a nice day. But what about like this later part of the show, after the
the finals? Yeah. So
finals.
We have finals where everyone is awarded. And if you've done your presentation in the morning, typically, if you're men's physique, bikini, wellness, figure, those are the ones that typically do their presentation in the morning. The evening show, that's where bodybuilding, classic, women's bodybuilding, and women's physique do their routine. And, the routine isn't necessarily judged unless it's like the Olympia and it's open bodybuilding. We do judge that. But we take a look at the athletes in finals as well to do confirmation of scoring, which is something that I think is really important for athletes to hear. It's kind of crazy, the questions that I get, even from pro athletes, like, am I judged in finals? And it's like, yes, like we may not, rearrange all the scoring, but we take a look at everyone, especially, the ones that are winning, placings and awards and money. Like they have to look the part at finals. If somebody goes and like pigs out and comes back with like a distended belly, it's happened, and they just think that they're home free. And if we see that and someone else, is better, we will change the scoring. So finals absolutely does matter. Yeah.
And what about on the local, small, amateur, regional stage? Does the scoring change later on at all?
I would say we still take a look. I mean, I can say that just like I get the sheets and I just make sure, everything looks right as far as, what the scoring was, it's consistent and stuff. But if someone comes back, like I said, and just looks crazy, like something's happened and their physique is totally changed and it's enough for us to reevaluate, we'll do that. We care about the outcome being right. And part of that is your physique at finals, just my advice to everyone is just hold it together. It's a few more hours. Don't do anything crazy. Stick to your plan. You'll be able to eat afterwards. That's the biggest mistake I see is like people eat too much and then their belly's distended, or they totally fade, like their conditioning, like say it's bodybuilding, they spill over and all of a sudden they're super smooth and they just don't look the part anymore. If it's a big enough deal, we will definitely make the correction so that the right person wins.
I think the biggest difference for the NPC and the IfBB judging is the conversation that happens on the panel, because I don't see that as often. Maybe in the WBFF, which I've judged for them too, that the conversation that happens on the panel is something that makes it unique. And people didn't like that. They were like, oh, it's rigged because now they're talking and now the opinion has been altered. But I have to ask, in order for you to become an NPC and IfBB judge, what is the journey to learning? What are the standards? Like, are there tests?
Yes.
Is there any schooling that the NPC has where you have to follow a certain pattern or process, meaning, and then take exams to actually become a judge? Or is it like, okay, you're a competitor in this organization, come sit on the panel and give me your opinion, which happens. So
yes.
I've seen a lot.
Yes.
Tell me.
I've seen a lot over time too. So I'm glad like they've standardized it significantly. And we actually have a scoring system that's all automated and everything that does the math for us, but it also takes test judge scores and processes them. So you can test judge a show and they take those scores and compare them with the actual results. And then you have to be within a certain percentage to qualify, I guess, as a judge. But you have to do that a couple of times on the local level. And other than just the scoring, we also say before the first call out is called, you have to hand in your top 5. So we're also saying, like, can you score within call outs, but also can you pick out the top 5 or something, relatively close, like 4 of the top 5 from a group just standing on stage. So I think those are really good metrics to say that someone has an eye and they're able to do it. That allows you to judge. What teaches them the
eye? What teaches them the eye? Just experience in the sport? Is it, do they have an actual, no, okay. So it is experience in the sport.
It's pretty much experience in the sport. And then most people that I know that are successful judges ask a lot of questions and ask like, well, what do you think about this? Or how do you look at this? And so there's a lot of knowledge transfer from more experienced judges to the ones that want to learn. That's certainly how I learned. And sometimes like the more experienced judges will put newer judges like next to me or someone else who's done it for a while so that they can ask questions. And then throughout the experience, they can ask something if they just don't understand or don't know. And that sort of brings their knowledge level up. They also have to pass a national test too. So just because you can judge on the local level doesn't mean that you can judge a national show. Again, you have to test judge at a national show, which is a lot more competitive, a lot bigger. It's definitely more difficult to judge on that level. So you have to pass that test as well to be able to judge on the national level. So there are requirements in place, which I think is good. Make sure that people do have the right eye and that they can judge in that environment too. It's a fast-paced environment. So you've got to be able to make decisions quickly and be decisive and sure in yourself and where you would place someone. That's another characteristic we want.
So it's really like people like you and Sandy, and all the other veterans, Gary, and all the real veterans that really keep the standard of the scoring what it is and what the organization wants. And it's less about there being a specific test or exam that you have to take. To be able to learn how to judge, there is experience. You have to be in the sport to kind of understand what you're even looking for. Mm-hmm. And then to go from there, people like you really keep the standard. So and I think the sharing of information is important versus somebody who's brand new, test judging, doesn't really know why the people scored the way they did. It's just their opinion. How do you learn?
Yes. And it's just an experience thing. And thankfully, a lot of this is top-down information. Like I myself learned so much from judging with Tyler. And I really value the times I see him throughout the year because we will have discussions like, wellness. We have to, make sure we're looking for this or like the changes that are coming for men's physique and really our emphasis on balance and not too big of arms or shoulders. Like that's been communicated to us, verbally. And then as we judge together, it's like, yeah, this is what we want. This is too much. So it's even a knowledge transfer to me that I share with others. And I think that's kind of how you have to do it other than just knowing the guidelines because it is subjective, right? Mm-hmm. You have to know what to do in this situation where you might have athletes on stage that no one looks the part, then what do you favor? What do you value? And it's just sharing your knowledge and experience. And the ones who get it, I would always say you either get it or you don't. And the ones that get it come along in time.
Yeah. And I think the top down is important, but at the end of the day, you did say it in the beginning of our chat that you have to judge what's up there. So
yes,
if everybody has ginormous shoulders,
yes,
what are you going to do? Someone's got to win.
Yes.
right? So now they're trying to put things like weight caps into place to try to tone things down a little bit to adhere to the standards. So that's another thing that helps, I think, too.
For sure. Then it makes
for
it
new
not
judges
so much
to come
on
in.
us. Yeah. Then it's not so much on the judge to say you're too big. Like we can say, oh, you're over the weight. So you're definitely too big for this category.
Yeah.
So it'll
and
be
even
helpful.
like this, are there standards about like coaches that you have to use? There's so much nonsense out there. So let's just clear the air.
I'm so glad
coaches, specific hair that you have to wear, or people you have to use for the makeup, people you have to use for the suit, tanning companies. And does it change? Okay, here's the extra part. Does it change when you go from amateur to pro?
No, absolutely not. I can say I have no idea for the most part who anyone trains or coaches. And even if I do, it doesn't factor into my decision because I am obligated to make a fair choice. And here's the thing is like, you know, my who wins shows, they see that. Tyler sees that. Like if I make a random choice, like out of favoritism, I'll be questioned about that. Like, why did this person win? Like it's not like I just operate in a bubble and I can do whatever I want. I'm beholden to the standards as well. So A, I would never do that. B, I would never, tank my career as a judge just for one person, And that's the thing, like you were saying about politics. Like people think there's all these politics. We don't know who is aligned with who works with what supplement company, who is working with what coach, nor would anyone really jeopardize their situation for something like that. For what? To give someone a placing like that? It just doesn't happen. Nor do we really have time to consider those things at the table. So coaching, nope. Doesn't matter who you work with. Half the time, I'll think someone is with a team and I'll like give feedback and they're like, that's not my athlete. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I have no idea. And as far
standards
as like
for hair, standards for hair, standards for suit, hair must be dark.
Oh gosh, I was just going to say that. That was the big thing when I competed in bikini. So being a blonde, I was like, I'm not changing my hair for the stage. Like I compete a couple times a year. I'm not going to do this to my hair and then have to live with it the rest of the year. That was a big thing. Your hair has to be black and straight. Like that's the only thing that wins. And it is so not the case. It's
Becky, there were people saying that.
Oh yeah. I'm not surprised.
My God.
I hear it myself.
All these gurus with a Z out there.
Yeah.
Can't.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And girls will ask us that, like, well, what do you think about my hair? Should I wear it straight or curly? And my thing is always like, how do you feel most confident? Like, what do you like the best? And, there are some things that you can do with your hair. Like if you're too muscular on top, some girls will put their hair in front. So longer hair extensions might work. There are things like that to consider, but that's so rarely the case. And
what about like hot pink hair?
I think if it looks healthy, it's fine. I think that's the big kicker there because I've had people say that to me as well, but we've had people turn pro or do well in shows with different colored hair, blue hair, whatever it is. I think the idea is for it to look healthy, which that kind of goes with the criteria, right? Like you're supposed to present a healthy, feminine appearance. And, let's be honest, just healthy looking hair, smooth, styled hair is part of that. That is what subconsciously conveys like a healthy put together appearance. So if you look, well groomed and pulled together, then, whatever your look is that you prefer, I say go for it. I think if you try to mess with that too much, then confidence wanes and you can tell someone who's uncomfortable on stage. I'm sure you deal with it with your posing clients.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and you can kind of nitpick to figure out what is this that you don't like that we've got to fix here.
You know what the biggest fix that I'm finding is that people think that they're supposed to look a certain way. And that the NPC and I was talking about it earlier, they want a certain thing. They want you to look a certain way. They want you to walk a certain way. They want you to transition a certain way, move a certain way. And I'll give you a quick story. So I had a student in my class and she's getting ready for a show. Amazing, amazing performer. Just from all the work that we do in the class, she has built an incredible uniqueness to her that is uniquely her. One day she posts this video because she says, here is my NPC routine. It was like nothing like her. I swear to God, it was nothing like her. I didn't even recognize her. I says, what makes you think it's an NPC routine? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what NPC, this is how they look. I'm like, well, that's because you saw a tutorial. Do you want to pose like a posing tutorial, or you want to be you on stage? And I think that's important to make that distinction, is that it's easy. If you think about what we're doing on stage, how many of us have ever really, like, if you're in your 50s and you're getting on stage for the first time in your underwear? I mean, when was the last time you were ever on stage to be willingly judged in front of a panel, by the way, an audience spectating you in your underwear with this, right? This means a lot to you guys. It means a lot. You want to look great. But the truth is, you've probably never performed for, 40 years, if you ever did it all, ever in front of an audience. Like, you are, in essence, performing. So I get that people want to have something to look off of that they can follow as a crutch, because you want them to feel confident. The more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to be. But then I like to take it a step further and be like, well, who are you? What does that look like for you? And I think what you're saying, Becky, with the hair, the suit, the color of the hair, all this stuff, is be you and be uniquely you. What does that look like for you is not going to be for me. You got blonde hair and you got 2 pro cards.
Yes.
Didn't matter.
Right. Mm-hmm. And
it didn't matter.
You hit the nail on the head. It is next level to be yourself on stage. I think that just jumps out at us. It's true, there are some poses that are pretty safe and standard, like to do for bikini. And like you said, if someone's never gotten on stage, those are pretty good to start with. Like, that's a pretty solid base. But if you can get someone to be themselves on stage and put their own personality into it, some younger girls are a little bit more cutesy. Some girls, like, you see someone like India Paulino, she's very sleek and sexy on stage. Like, that's who they are, and that's who their stage persona is. And I love that it's unique. That's what makes them stand out and makes us look at them. And so that is the next level, I think, to posing, where you can really get them to embrace it and put something of themselves into it.
Well, you heard it from Becky herself. Be yourself, be unique. Becky, what is the most difficult division to judge across all the men and women? And what's the least difficult? Which one's the easiest? I got it in the bag. I'm comparative to all the others. And what's the most difficult?
I would say I think bikini is relatively easy for me, just because I judge it quite often. I get super nervous at the Olympia, though, where there's like all these athletes they're so close, and it is like splitting hairs, just deciding, amongst those girls. They're all such great examples. So that's where it gets a little dicey. I would say like open bodybuilding, but I think I only, just because I psych myself up for it, like, it's so visible. There's big prize money, there's not as many shows. Them going to the Olympia is such a huge deal. Bodybuilding itself is probably the easiest to judge, because there's no suit, hair, makeup, like, none of that matters. It's muscularity, conditioning, proportions. It's probably the more cut and dried one, but that's the one that, like, it's such a big deal and so visible that I think that's the one I get like the most amped up for.
So it's self-induced pressure.
Yes.
But you know what you're talking about. At the end of the day, you know what you're talking about. Who's your favorite competitor of all time? Physique, I should say. Not competitor, but who's your favorite physique, male or female? Do you have one?
I definitely do. So male is Dexter Jackson. He's just
the blade.
Phenomenal. I mean,
Dexter the Blade.
Yes. And I saw him compete back in 2004, and just his conditioning, he was always on point, so balanced. And he proved that you didn't have to be freaky, to win a show. I mean, he won so many shows, and his longevity, like, I think he did 80 some pro shows. He had 29 wins, and I think he was never out of the top 10. And for all but 5 of them, he was never out of the top 5. Like, that's incredible to me. Like, his longevity and just the way he built his physique. He used to be a bantamweight. So he was teeny tiny. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So talk about someone like building their way up and growing into the sport. Yeah. So I'm someone that's I really like the aesthetic and shape of a nice balanced physique. And I think, he's definitely one of the best to ever do it.
Dexter the Blade Jackson. That's a good pick.
Yes. Yeah.
I like that one.
How about you?
Well, what do you think? Who's my fave of all time? Man,
It's hard,
the
right?
best of all. It is. If I think back to, I have to say, I know it's going to sound really cliche, but I really loved Ronnie Coleman.
Yes.
I know.
I totally
it's very cliche.
That. He's awesome though. He was big when I started competing, and I was such a fan. I bought all the magazines with him in it, and yeah, he's awesome.
But it was his personality too. He was just everything.
Yep.
And he's so humble. Like he has every reason to be, touting his accolades, but he doesn't. He's just like, this is me. And he's still at it, even after all the back issues that he's had, he's still at it. So to me, I just think from just the flow standpoint, the physique standpoint, and the personality standpoint, that one really jumps out at me.
Yeah, that's a great choice.
Do you think that they're going to be adding any, or is there any talk of additional divisions to add any more variety to the IfBB or NPC, or are we pretty much there?
I haven't heard anything. I would always be interested if maybe there was a another men's division. I don't know if that's even possible because we have so many women's divisions, but I'm not sure. Not that I've heard. I think right now we're interested in maintaining the ones we have and making sure, especially with the newer ones we've introduced, like wellness, that we're making sure the criteria is firm and that the athletes exemplify that, the athletes at the top of the sport. So I think we'll probably do that for a little while.
So going forward, no real talks of anything new, just refinement. What about you? Do you have any goals, and where are you looking to take this? So you're judging like a maniac all over the world.
Yes. Traveling like crazy.
Meanwhile, she has another job that she's working. What are your plans?
Yes.
What are your goals?
I think I just want to continue to get better at what I do. That's very important for me. I think you never stop learning. And I feel like I have good knowledge, but there is always something else to learn. And I just want to continue to get better at not only judging, but helping to facilitate good productions. Like we were talking, the head judge has a lot to do with that. So I want to make sure I keep learning how to facilitate those things. I always, of course, have a bucket list of shows I want to judge. I want to go to Dubai someday. So I'm like, I hope I get that that show someday. Being able to travel has been a huge blessing, and I've really enjoyed that. And I hope to continue doing that. Not only because I get to see these places that really without this opportunity, I don't think I'd ever travel to in a million years. I just wouldn't have the ability to. And also to meet the athletes there. It's really touching to see the passion of these athletes who maybe even haven't had as much opportunity in the past. Like with the expansion of the NPC worldwide, they have more shows and more opportunity to compete. And I think they're really grateful for that. And there's something really inspiring and refreshing about seeing those athletes that are just so happy to get on stage. So just more of that, as much as I can do. Yeah.
I love that. Do you have anything to plug? Any shows that you want to make sure people attend?
I mean, the Ben Leader, I will say that I'm head judging that.
One. Oh, good.
So I'll be there, and I would love to.
And that's coming up pretty soon.
It is. It's 2 weeks after the Olympia. So I'll be there, and I'm excited for that because actually some of the international athletes are coming to that, which I'm super excited
fantastic.
for. They're actually flying in for that. So I'll be there if anyone, if this is out by that time, if anyone wants to say hi or chat, I'll be there. But other than that, I just judge. I don't coach. I don't promote anything, which I kind of like. This is just my hobby and my love and my passion. And, I'm not motivated by anything other than just the joy of doing it and wanting to do a good job. So my only plug is for, people like you who continue to get information out there and encourage athletes. I love the fact that you dabble in all different, federations. And so you can help an athlete find their best fit and, put them in a place where they'll succeed and have a good experience. And, you have so many opportunities that you can introduce athletes to. So I really love that. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. And thank you for being with me today. I think the athletes, no matter where their journey is, there's something for them. I think it's great to kind of give them a soup to nuts summary of what the NPC and the IfBB is all about. I think there's a lot of confusion. So I like to bring people on that are actual fact deliverers The people that are going to tell it how it is, and you're so unbiased. And I do love after the Olympia, you give some really great recaps. So on Instagram, Becky, what is your handle on Instagram? Because you should totally go follow Becky and find her and follow her. Because even after the shows, you give like a real good summary of the champion and how they adhered to the criteria.
Yes.
And I think that's important because a lot of people get very upset by their favorite didn't win. So you really kind of explain what made that person be the standout on that. So Becky, what is your handle on Instagram? Because that's where you are a lot, right?
Yep. It's Fit Pro Becky.
There you go. Fit Pro, Becky. And if you are looking to do an NPC and IfBB show, I do have a virtual posing clinic coming up October 28th, learntopose.com/NPC or just learntopose.com. I do them monthly, so no matter where you are in the world or where you are in the country, come learn how to pose. That's my jam. You will learn every single men and women division down to the micro details. So definitely come check that out as well. Becky, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. Do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, just a huge thank you. I hope that people get some information from this, and I hope that they're inspired to get on stage. I think there's a place for everyone in bodybuilding, and I hope that people find that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Becky. Thank you for joining me. Signing off today. Take care, everybody. See you next week.
Ever wonder if you are posing correctly for your division? Learn to Pose is dedicated to taking out the guesswork on how to pose for all categories in bodybuilding. Learn 5 ways you can improve your posing skills in 5 minutes guaranteed at www.learntopose.com. There are free posing tutorials available for the bikini, figure, and men's physique categories, and more on the way for other divisions in bodybuilding. It's free, so go access your free posing tutorial for bikini, figure, or men's physique at learntopose.com.
Michelle's a longtime pro competitor and judge across many federations, and she's helped me with my posing so much, building confidence on stage, and I got so many great comments and feedback from the judges after I started working with Michelle. There's no one better, and there's no one that's going to help you get your posing in a better place than Michelle will.
Hi, my name is Dawn Graves, and I've been a bikini competitor for coming up on 13 years. I started working with Michelle on the recommendation of my friend Suzanne, because I saw how quickly she was able to transform Suzanne's posing, and I really need to up my posing game. And as always, I'm looking to get my pro card, even though I'm in my 50s, and Michelle never makes me feel embarrassed or uncomfortable, and I keep coming back, and I love working with her.